As I listen to Stevie Wonder's journey through the secret life of plants, I'm amazed at the relationship between the plant world and humans. There's a delicate but profound exchange between the two, one that dates back to the beginning of time. Not so long ago, I listened to an interview of ethnobotanist Claudia Ford. In her interview, she explained her research on the indigenous and the African diaspora's connection to the plant world. She bridged the gap between their knowledge and Western understanding of herbal medicine. Throughout her study, we find that Black and indigenous voices were kept out of the textbooks, but their spiritual connection to botany never ceased. Using creative modalities, Dr. Ford derived information from historical texts to show how plants were utilized by the enslaved Africans and Native Americans of the 19th century. This data is beneficial because it gives us insight into how herbal knowledge was passed down and how we can continue to do so for future generations. Ethnobotany is a scientific study of the traditional knowledge and customs of people concerning plants' medical and religious uses. Being a woman of the African diaspora, I understand that my ancestral relationship with plants comes with its unique twists and turns. Plants have been beneficial to my ancestors. They have been used to heal and protect, and their wisdom surrounding plant life was not stifled due to the Middle Passage. Being on new soil introduced them to different herbal medicines that help alleviate some of the suffering they endured throughout slavery. However, herbal remedies were also used to destroy them. For Black women, the potion derived from plants were utilized by slave masters to harm their souls. We see example of this through the application of the cotton plant and the black haw herb. During the era of slavery, documents show that enslaved women utilized the cotton plant for their reproductive justice. Cotton was an ally for inducing abortions for unwanted pregnancy. Before knowing this information, the idea of cotton being used in slavery for anything besides profit seemed unimaginable. In actuality, I felt disdained. It was because I have heard stories of countless blood being shed over the production of this crop. Humans were beaten, families torn apart, and trauma passed on. But one thing I now know is that the Black women whose labor was used to produce this plant found a companion in it as well. There's a power behind that knowing. To counteract Black women's success, plantation owners consulted with Western doctors to find a plant that curbed an abortion in process. Dr. Ford's research led her to articles where doctors debated the use of cotton for the enslaved. The plantation owners saw the enslaved woman's relationship to cotton as an economic issue that needed to be resolved. The traditional uses of cotton root and its seeds were used to regulate menstruation, and it was common knowledge that anything used for that purpose could be taken to prevent or abort a pregnancy. As a result, the black haw herb was recommended to plantation owners as an anti-abortion method. Doctors instructed owners that if a slave did take cotton seed or root to induce an abortion, the black haw herb would reverse that process. We can see the cultural struggle between the African diaspora and the European plantation owners through those two plants alone. But to understand why abortions were so prevalent among the enslaved, we had to look at the pivotal shift within the American system. When cotton was used as a cash crop, laws surrounding the importation of slaves began to change. Slave owners were getting pushback from the government about importing new slaves into the U.S. from the African continent, so they began to operate homegrown slaves. As a result, Black women's bodies were abused to produce more life for this system. Dr. Ford's research showed that during this vital time in slave history, white slave owners kept detailed records of each birth. Their records were business paperwork needed to record the success and failures of an enslaved woman's labor. At the same time, the passing of information was particular during childbirth. The social hierarchy was momentarily seized for the most qualified practitioners to step forth. Midwives from all backgrounds recorded the errors and success while passing on herbal remedies used in successful deliveries. The midwives were typically local Native Americans or an enslaved African woman from surrounding plantations. But due to the socioeconomic hierarchy, those highly skilled practitioners are not the voices recorded throughout history books. In modern times, the high maternal death rate we see among Black and Indigenous women may be connected to our ancestors' silencing. Looking back on how our ancestors utilized and had a relationship to plants to work through their reproductive health will connect us with how we can do the same today. The cotton plant was just one plant ally that survived the silencing. Of course, there were many others. One tool for that survival is storytelling. It is a way to pass on our ancestral knowledge. By following a plant story, we understand how different cultures view herbal allies. It shapes how we relate to plants in the present. We are also reminded that plants are sovereign beings. They are more than just commodities and something we utilize for our gain. Building relationships with them will sustain us and our ancestral practices. So as I sign off, I want to propose to the general public to start thinking about your ancestors' relationship with their plant allies. What are some of the stories you remember being told? How would you pass those down to future generations? Thank you to Ethnobotanist Claudia Ford and the American Botanical Council for that insightful interview. The link will be in the description box for all those who want to check it out. Peace.